how do we protect our privacy? Many company business model depends on the access to personal data. People are not very attentive to privacy and leave a lot of personal information on the internet. And in the name of terror, government surveillance has increased rapidly this decade. And there is also the threat of cybercrime and hacking. We would like to start a cross-party working group about privacy, where we put privacy into the center, because nobody actually protect privacy. There's a lot of think tanks about many topics, but privacy in itself needs to be protected, needs to be in the center of discussion.
When we are talking about adaptation of privacy concepts into the technological world, there is a tendency to say, well, this does not apply anymore. So we just skip privacy legislation and we do something else. We have to define personal data as it is to be defined with a quite large scope of meaning. And then we also have to recognize that in some cases, some of the obligations which will be triggered by the fact that we are dealing with personal data will have to have exceptions. So the controller will have to have some exceptions of the obligations that this legislation is foreseen.
The internet was conceived without an identity layer. Websites have to design their own means for identifying and authenticating individuals, their users. RFID is an important technology that challenges the way we think about privacy, and I know this has been a topic of intense consideration here in Brussels. We've also been working at it in the OECD. We've come up with a set of recommendations. We recognize that there's a potential for tracking in RFID, and although many RFID uses pose no privacy challenges at all, the general capacity for invisibility does present particular challenges related to notice, knowledge, consent, and transparency. We do need to marshal a broad, diverse cross-section of the privacy community to reflect on the current challenges. Seminars like this one are exactly the kind of thing that we think is needed, and it's plainly not a question just for the OECD. We need other intergovernmental organizations. We need the private sector. We need civil society. We need to take some direction from the individuals whose data we are trying to protect.
We need stronger research. We need to know about these privacy-enhancing technologies that some have mentioned already, and how we can actually find innovative solutions to these problems. Cloud computing the problems of cloud computing will not be solved by passing laws alone. We actually need strong research into the nature of the problem and to find technological solutions to it. And secondly, we need strong engagement. We need to bring all the stakeholders to the table like we are today. And so it's rare that I actually say this, but I would recommend that the EU actually play that role. The EU has been a source of so many bad laws in the past few years. So many of the disastrous surveillance schemes have originated from the European Union, from the Commission, from the Council, and pushed through the Parliament. Now is the time for a different agenda to arise, where the European Commission does research on privacy protection, where the European Parliament conducts more of these meetings, bringing together everybody to find more solutions to these complicated problems.
Privacy can be designed into systems. It is fundamentally about maintaining a degree of control over your personal data. It's also about appreciating that you don't have complete control over every piece of information about you. As you engage with the world and share information with other people, there is some ceding of control. But that doesn't mean that you get access to every piece of information about me, and I don't get access to every piece of information about you. As we've seen more and more people establishing their own presence on the internet and wanting more control over that, how do we give them that control? How do we design the technologies that allow them to make those choices, to share pieces of information, to do the things that we as humans have always done?
I don't think that the big issue here is what companies or what business does with our data, because we do have some legislation which may need to be updated. I think awareness and education of people is also an important aspect. If we give our data to a company in return for a particular service or product, but it ends up with the FBI or, well, you name it, some government agency which uses it for completely different purposes. That, I think, is a big issue. The way we've organized our governance is still very much geographically determined, whereas data are available all over the globe at any given moment. We're making laws which are outdated as we speak. So that is an aspect that I think we should address.
When we're dealing about e-privacy or privacy, there's no proposal. How do we deal, in fact, in the field of justice and home affairs issues, how governments deal and behave? I mean, there are proposals out there, and we all know that the member states are not really looking forward to adopt them. We do not have really public organized civil liberties protections or in general privacy organizations. It is very, very much organized by states through data protection authorities or issues like that. So people just rely on that they will take care of everything. One has to acknowledge that time moves on with technology. And it doesn't mean giving everything up, but you have to, if you consider legislation necessary, then adjust it to the situation going on. Sophie and I are having the fun, for example, looking at the EU-US data protection agreement, which is an interesting approach. So I think also the EDPS would agree that there's quite a lack of important substance in terms of the European perspective.
The Data Retention Directive and the Swedish law, which I was talking about, they're both built on the assumption that the government should have access to everything. That's the problem. That opens up for misuse. So I think the correct way or the alternative is to give the government limited access. In Sweden, and I guess in all other European countries, we have rules which give the police limited access. If you have somebody suspected for a crime, you can get the court order, and then you can get the information. So I think we should stick to the old rules.
Large parts of our society are elderly people who do not understand a computer, immigrants who cannot read the language, children who increasingly start to understand technology better than their parents. But what it also means is that right-based protections, like opt-in and opt-out, require the personal ability to recognize the presence of a rights-based situation and rights violations. Making the wrong choice may actually harm the individual. For opt-in, for instance, if you opt in to the wrong person, you may be a victim of identity theft. Or for social exclusion if you choose to opt out from technology. The technology dependency may create risks for our fundamental freedoms. And that is a challenge for technology industry. How to protect fundamental freedoms when creating technology.
Current and existing data protection principles, for example, as laid down in the Data Protection Directive, are good. I, at least, will stick to them unless I find something better, and they're more important than ever. Data protection, yes, it's a fundamental right, but seemingly some people in the European Union and the institutions, they still need to learn this. The EU as such is hobbled by the pillar structure. At least in Sweden, there is a discussion at national level about rules like this. In the European Union, there is very little discussion. There is some, thanks to the European Parliament, but very little. We need to be stricter on this. We need to have serious privacy impact assessment tests. We need to have a strict application of the necessity test. It is not enough for police, for example, to say, this is useful, there is information out there which I could use. No, we have to have the courage to say, if it is not necessary for something, you have to say no.